The Monstera Deliciosa comes from the Araceae family, and it's part of the major group of angiosperms, meaning flowering plants. It's also called a Mexican breadfruit because of its reference to the corn of the cob shaped fruit, which people have said that it tastes like a mixture of pineapple, banana, and mango. Although, if you eat it before it is ripe, it can cause mouth irritation, and it's especially poisonous all the way through to us and to animals. It's commonly confused with split-leaf philodendrons, particularly in the baby, less mature plants. A way that we can figure out if it's not a monstera is particularly by its leaves. A split-leaf philodendrons will have the perforated leaves just as the Monstera deliciosa, but it will lack holes. They are native to Mexico and Central America, and they can grow about 30 feet to 70 feet tall in the wilds, and its leaves span about 2 feet wide. They thrive in zones 10 through 12, and luckily for me, I currently live in a zone 10, and I do have one monstera for the last 8 months, and I will later go into detail about why I decided to get a monstera and what influenced me into getting a monstera. If you want a plant that will help turn your home into a tropical oasis and pretend that you're at a beach at all times, then a monstera is the perfect plant for you. It can be found in any nursery, or in an abundance, it can be found in Lowe's or in Home Depot. It's best to have a trellis to help support and encourage the upward growth of its leaves, especially because they're heavy. If it is an injured plant, make sure it is not hidden in a corner because they will get bushy, and do recall that the leaves get about 2 feet wide. It tolerates low light, but it grows way faster in bright and indirect light. Be sure to water and mist it regularly, especially misting it weekly, as they are commonly found from Mexico to Panama in Central American rainforests. So it's best to have an environment like a tropical environment. It enjoys water when the soil has been dried. It's best to decide if it's dry or not by sticking in your finger about 2 inches deep into the soil. Also, clean the leaves regularly. You can fertilize the plant a couple times throughout spring and summer, its growing season. You can even fertilize it weekly during this growing season. They also thrive within 68 degrees to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. A monstera is a large plant, and it needs to be repotted if it's in a pot every couple years to support its root systems. As with every other plant, when switching pots, pick one that is a couple inches larger in height and in width than your previous one to give it sufficient room to grow. If you're going to keep it in the same pot, which isn't recommended, cut back its leaves regularly to avoid any root rots. A common propagation technique is called air layering. You would need to locate a leaf with a small area root right below it. Cut a notch below that root that's about 1/3 of the stem's diameter, and wrap this area, the root, the notch, and the node, which is where the leaf meets the stem, with a layer of damp floral or moss. Wrap its moss in a plastic tight enough so it stays secure, but loose enough so you can open it and check its root every so often. You can secure the moss with any regular string, ties on hands, and once you start to see roots coming out, you can cut the stem and plant it in its new soil. A common problem with Monstera deliciosas are that they're not getting enough sunlight. Its holes and splits can only develop if it's getting enough sunlight, as it's argued that the splits and holes are there to filter out sunlight and filter out water. If this keeps happening, Maybe water your plant a little less until its soil feels dry. And if it still is happening, repot it in fresh soil. If even after you repot it, it's still not working, feed your plant some fertilizer and it should revive itself to health. Another way that you can tell that your plant is having a little bit of an issue is its brown leaves. This can be from dry air and low humidity, as well as being sunburnt from too much direct light. Remember to always mist your plant once a week, or keeping a humidifier if it's indoors. There are common pests that are found. As demands go up for houseplants, there's a big supply problem with importing them. There aren't enough nurseries to grow them, and there's a big market of people who want them. It's been confirmed that there is no any permit issuing problems for monsteras, but there are biosecurity risks that have to be considered before they are imported. They are mildly invasive plants as well, They are in parts of an endangered rainforest. Because of the biosecurity risks and the demand, people will pay a lot of money to have a monstera. We have to be patient, and things take time to grow and to be imported. There's a growing trend in monsteras. You wouldn't know it, but monsteras are somewhat hard to come by. They're labeled as easy to grow plants, although they're somewhat slow growing unless they're in the perfect tropical environment with lots of humidity. They're also a mildly invasive plant, and I wanted to know how consumers purchasing monsteras regularly affected the environment and affected the economy. Instead, I found an article that based labels on plants and how it affected consumers. One possible strategy found in this article was labeling plants based on whether they're invasive or if they're native. Monsteras are not native to the United States by any means. The purpose of the article was to explore how labeling them might affect our consumers' demand for plants. They priced an auction where the willingness to pay for the plants with and without labels. On average, they found 35-cent premiums for plants labeled as non-invasive and native, and a $1.01 to $1.66 discount for plants labeled as invasive. The size of the premiums and discounts were in relation to the various demographic and preference-related factors. Overall, their findings suggested that labeling plants invasive or native could be a viable strategy to help reduce the introduction of invasive plants. Invasive plants were cheaper on average than non-invasive and native plants. Monsteras. Mealybugs along their leaves, spider mites. Routinely wipe your leaves down once a week to keep them clean and remove its dust. This will keep the leaves green and shiny and healthy. Constantly wipe them off if you find any sort of mealybugs or spider mites with a mild soap solution or a gentle insecticide to get rid of them.